Hey everyone, sorry I'm late to the video. I got back from a totally real doctor who says I have a terrible case of... Thankfully he claims that it only lasts about as long as the Fast and Furious franchise takes to get through in minutes, so hopefully I can just ride this out. How many of those damn movies were there?
It's a classic Hollywood tale.
Pornography.
No, when you have this movie that makes a damn good amount of money, you want to make a sequel to it, or maybe continue the story. In cases like The Godfather, we got one of the greatest films of all time, and it was a sequel. It was something like Across the Spider-Verse, The Dark Knight. These are all sequels that took the story a step further and made an impact. Toy Story 5!
Well, obviously.
Sometimes Hollywood just doesn't stop, and we get movie series that literally go on way too long. There's a lot of franchises out there that couldn't just stop at a trilogy. Hell, some of these work better as standalone films. So we're going to take a look at some series that just refuse to die, series that just got way too many sequels. I'll also point out the best and worst sequel of each franchise. One would probably point to Fast and Furious, 10 mainline films plus a spinoff in 2019, and you can see why it's often the cover child of Dear God, Just Let It Die! For my money, I always think of a film that, even by the first film standards, didn't need a sequel. Home Alone. In 1990, Chris Columbus, Joe Pesci, and this kid teamed up to make the holiday comedy Home Alone, which was a huge success and definitely put this kid on the map. Home Alone was monumental, and especially at the time when holiday movies needed a little boost. So how about another? And another? Another? How about another? Jesus Christ, 6 movies spanning from 1990 to frickin' 2021. The first sequel came in 1992, Lost in New York. Now, all things considered, this isn't bad. At least not as bad as some of the rest of these movies get. But there is one issue that really bothers me with this film. That's gross. Yep, this is the longest film of the 6, clocking at a whole 2 hours. I can't even see why. There's a lot of filler in this. But listen, it's certainly better than this. Home Alone 3 released 5 years later in 1997. New kid, different robbers, all bullshit. Oh, and the robbers are actually spies. I don't know. First things first, Macaulay Culkin is not Kevin in this one, which, yeah, he would have been 16 or 17 by filming, and he himself was tired of the role. But this new kid isn't really that great. He's more annoying than anything, which sadly is a consistent thing with the kids after Culkin. If you need another reason to hate this film, it was the directorial debut of Raja Gosnell. You know, Raja Gosnell, the guy behind... At least this movie didn't have too many careers it could ruin. Except for Scarlett frickin' Johansson. Yeah, she's just here. Listen, seeing any of these MCU actors before Iron Man came out is weird. Home Alone 3 was bad, but I guess it's also incredibly harmless. Home Alone 4, however, is where it became very clear that they just wanted to make anything Home Alone. This time, instead of Kevin or Alex, we have Kevin. That ain't Kevin, that's the kid from Life as a House.
Not the kid from Life as a House!
But hey, French Stewart's in this one.
Thank God.
I found this one's director to have much more of an interesting career than Raja Gosnell because it seems Rod Daniel had a real knack for cult classics. We have the 1985 cult classic Teen Wolf, the 1989 cult classic K-9, one of the easily most underrated DComs of all time, Alley Cat Strike. None of that matters because Home Alone 4 ain't no cult classic. It's bad, but not nearly as bad as Home Alone 5, or Home Alone the Holiday Heist, which had such people as... Oh wait, Eddie Steeples, Darnell from My Name is Earl, Debbie Mazur from Empire Records, Malcolm McDowell and Ed Asner, and even the director... Okay, this time it makes sense. It's Peter Hewitt, who had such magnum opuses as Tom and Huck, Zoom, and Garfield 2004. I guess he also had Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey? Home Sweet Home Alone released on Disney Plus exclusively in 2021. There's a lot of ways to piss me off, but there is no way to hurt me more than making Kevin McAllister British. Oi, just so ya bloody cucks know, I gotta spy ya. I recognize this kid from Jojo Rabbit, and he definitely had charm there, but here, he easily makes my least favorite Kevin. Rob Delaney is the only good thing about this movie. Other than that, bad. Just bad. Of all the sequels, I'd say the worst one is Home Sweet Home Alone, and I'd argue the best one was Home Alone 2. Do I even have to explain? This is the Fast and Furious franchise, couldn't you tell? What should have been just a simple 2001 slightly above average action film became, oh, so much more. A big selling point of the franchise for a while was Vin Diesel, so obviously for the sequel, let's take out Vin Diesel, emphasize people who weren't even in the first movie, and give none of these people personalities. Too Fast, Too Furious was a total flop for fans, and it really showcased how these films needed rework. Not that much rework! This one followed a completely new crew, but I agree it's probably better than the second movie. They went back to basics with the 2009 film that was basically the same name, and it's definitely a step up from the last few entries. But it's at the end of the day a completely generic action flick. I'd say the stretch of Fast 5 to Furious 7 are the peak of the franchise, with the worst one in my mind being Fast 5, and it's not even that bad.
Hey Mia, you better hide your baby or... I'm just playing.
You better hide that big ass forehead.
Furious 7 obviously was known for its tribute to Paul Walker, as it's the last Fast and Furious film to have him before his sad passing in 2013. Fate of the Furious was cheap and kinda generic, but far from the worst. And F9 and Fast X are pretty interchangeable, both incredibly bland action films with zero substance and nothing going for them. You know what's crazy? The first movie was 2001 and the latest was last year. 22 years of this franchise, and yeah, we're sick of it. The only good movies range from 5 and 7, and it's sad I can actually say that. So what's the best sequel? Yeah, I'd probably say Furious 7, a beautiful tribute plus one of the best stories in the franchise. And the worst? This may come off as douchey, but I'd argue the second film is actually the worst. Sure, 9 or 10 are way more stupid, but there's at least entertainment there. Too Fast, Too Furious came out at a time when the franchise wasn't known for stupidity, and some of the moves it makes just doesn't work for the film. Indiana Jones was one of the greatest adventure film trilogies ever. Raiders of the Lost Ark was a huge hit and gave birth to this great character. Temple of Doom, while a bit darker than the others, was still fun to watch and had some of my favorite indie scenes. And Last Crusade was a beautiful bookend to the beautiful story. One of the greatest trilogies of all time. In 2008, we got Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yay. The film was very unnecessary to many, and yeah, it's got some dumb moments. The infamous scene where Indy hops into a fridge and survives a nuclear blast definitely gave some trauma to Indiana Jones fans. And how about Shia LaBeouf? He's killed off in the 5th movie.
The 5th movie?
Yep, just recently in 2023, good old Indy came around in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. While the jump the shark moments were heavily toned down, they still go to ancient Rome or something in the final third, and it's just... yeah, you gotta remember this is a modern Indiana Jones film. This is definitely one of those cases where if they stopped at The Last Crusade, it could have been a beautiful trilogy, one of the greats. Hell, The Last Crusade literally ends on a ride into the sunset. But because they just had to acknowledge Shia LaBeouf exists, we got a burnout series just by 5 films. The best sequel? Well, that's obvious, The Last Crusade. And the worst sequel? While Dial of Destiny has no reason or right to exist, I'd have to go with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Oh, I get it. Indiana Jones gets in the fridge and he survives a nuclear blast. The nuclear blast that definitely would have killed him, just like my kitchen gun's gonna kill me. Gabe, where's my kitchen gun?
Terminator was yet another case of sequels that started alright but kept getting worse by each entry. The only difference from Indy is that it didn't take 4 films for the downhill spiral to occur, it took damn 3. The first film is of course a classic, but Terminator 2 Judgment Day is easily one of the greatest sequels of all time, and really turned around the Terminator character, unironically making him incredibly human despite being a robot. And you may scoff at the effects nowadays, but back in 1991 these were insane. You know what, James Cameron, we've had our differences, but you can have this W. This was an incredible sequel, but you already knew that. Terminator was released 12 years later in 2003. Now, give this film total credit, it's not as bad as later films got. But dude, after the emotional powerhouse of T2, did you really think this is how it would be continued? It's not the first or second film, but I guess it's not the later films. Speaking of which, Salvation released in 2009, and you can tell this was from the director of Charlie's Angels Full Throttle.
No, really?
Just a dull and generic action sequel, but it's definitely leagues more interesting than T3. You know what the opposite of more interesting than T3 is?
Terrorism.
Terminator Genesis released in 2015, and just to show these movies didn't care about their fans, John Connor is right there front and fucking center, obviously showcasing that he is a cyborg despite being the leader of the rebellion against Skynet. Look, the twist was bad enough, and Genesis is definitely a bad film, but you gotta give credit. If they kept it a secret, the twist maybe would have worked better. I don't think it would have saved the film, but it could have created a tough dilemma that really makes the film worth the experience.
Nah, I'm just kidding, the twist would still suck.
This poster specifically is infamous as one of the big posters that spoil the movie posters. It doesn't help that it's the poster on the film's IMDb page too. There is no escaping this spoiler. We eventually got to Terminator Dark Fate in 2019, and it's good. But you still watch Genesis. So that's 6 films, and I definitely go with T2 as the best sequel, obviously, and while T3 and Salvation are equal in terms of bad, Genesis is very obviously the worst film. Though I'd actually argue T1, T2, and Dark Fate are somewhat worth watching, making half the franchise viewable at least. Pirates of the Caribbean went from Disney's biggest laughingstock to, wait, it's good? To, wait, are we cooking? To Disney's biggest laughingstock. Curse of the Black Pearl released in 2003, and to many surprise, it was actually a solid enough film. It defied all odds of being based on a Disney ride.
Dear God!
Gave Johnny Depp one of his greatest and most iconic characters, and was just overall an all-around great film. And Dead Man's Chest, released in 2006, gave one of Disney's best effects with Davy Jones, and one of Depp's best improvs.
I got a jar of death. I got a jar.
You know what they say though, we got children to hang.
I should really check my quote sources.
The third film, At World's End, released in 2007, and for some weird reason took a way darker approach. Literally, the opening scene, we see a child hang alongside many, many others. This felt strange, as while the films could have dark moments, they were very uncommon, mostly kept things lighthearted. This one just takes a weird, dark approach, and it feels so forced. In 2011, we got On Stranger Tides, and it's alright. It's not amazing, and after At World's End, Gore Verbinski was dropped as the director and was replaced with Rob Marshall. A lot of people commend his work like Chicago and Into the Woods, considering how well he handles musicals. And yeah, he's great at it, but man, I can only handle so many musicals, man. So how does he handle an action-adventure pirate film?
About as well as I can handle this paper plate. Think fast, trickle nuts.
It's clear maybe he needs to stick to musicals, which sucks. I hate when directors are forced to do one genre, but he does musicals well, so let him do musicals. But that leads me to Pirates 5, Dead Men Tell No Tales. This film is pretty bad. The only thing that redeems it would be Javier Bardem as Captain Salazar, as everything else, even Death Sparrow, gets really old by this point. I'd argue this franchise started good, but just went on too long with unfortunate changes. A lot of people hated that they eventually replaced Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, but the replacements are just as bad. It's kind of like saying,
That's a cardboard box, and that's another cardboard box.
the best sequel was definitely Dead Man's Chest, and while Dead Men Tell No Tales was really bad, I'm gonna go with At World's End as the worst sequel, considering it took the franchise down a dark path that felt completely unneeded. For that, At World's End takes the worst spot. Now, Toy Story is a very tough one because I would not consider any of the 4 Toy Story films bad, but they definitely are starting to get there. It's no secret that Toy Story was a massive hit and really saved Disney there for a while, alongside gave birth to the idea of CG animated feature films, which unironically killed Disney again. And Toy Story 2 was just as important as it was Pixar's first sequel. The fact that some people consider Toy Story 2 one of the best Pixar films shows everything you need to know about this movie. Toy Story 3 could have had an At World's End problem of going too dark, but I never felt it did. It still felt like Toy Story even with its darker tone, and it had some crazy good emotional scenes. Truly, while I like Toy Story 2 more, I would call Toy Story 3 a perfect and goddammit. In 2019, we saw Toy Story 4. This little bastard calls this a great film.
Surprising that I liked it as much, because I was kind of worried.
Good would have sufficed, you fucking liar. Toy Story 4 is not a bad movie or even a bad Pixar movie, but it literally had no reason to exist. I once compared Kung Fu Panda 4 to Toy Story 4, and I think that's fair. Neither sequel need to exist, but it's fun in their own rights. I like the return to form of not having a major villain. It made this feel like a tribute to the first film, which also didn't have a traditional villain. However, Toy Story 5 releases in 2026, and while it's too early to judge for sure, I think we really need to stop supporting these films as much as we do. Both Toy Story 3 and 4 made over $1 billion at the box office, and that's cool and all, but I do think that's sending the wrong message to Pixar. Regardless, none of these sequels are bad, but Toy Story 4 is definitely the worst sequel, while Toy Story 2 is, in my opinion, the best one.
Huck to and spit on that thing. You get me?
You know when an animated movie has to make you say,
I swear that's just how they normally howl.
said animated movie is probably not good. Now this and another animated franchise I'll get to later are kind of cheating because these were DVD sequels, so I guess it's unfair to call them official sequels. But Alpha and Omega released back in 2010 and was essentially a Romeo-Juliet love story for furries. Kate's hot and all, but the film is just kind of standard. It does exactly what you expect.
DeviantArt, here I come.
However, this film got 7 freaking sequels. There's way too many and none of them are good, so I'll just breeze right through them. Alpha and Omega 2 is a bland Christmas special. Kinda. It has nothing to do with Christmas, but Jimmy Neutron voices the youngest pup who's named Runt. His parents have to hate him. Alpha and Omega 3 was a sports-type film following some kind of wolf games. It sucks in this one wolf pup sounds like a 20-year-old man. The 4th film was a Halloween flick, and it easily is the best of the sequels, but it's not really good, and the animation seems to get worse from here. But the plot is easily more interesting than the last 2 films. Family Vacation gets a lot of love from the fandom, but it's really nothing special. Probably the second best of the sequels, but it's got a lot of cringe scenes and just downright annoying characters. Dino Digs. The Big Freeze is just kind of okay. It doesn't do anything notably atrocious, but it's ultimately dull. And Journey to the Bear Kingdom, the last film. This is ultimately bad, but it's not nearly the worst in my mind. That easily goes to Dino Digs, which is just stupid. It's a dinosaur plot with these characters thrown in for no reason. If I had to actually pinpoint the best, I mean, they all suck, but I'd argue the Halloween one was pretty below average, which is a high bar. Other than that, this franchise, you know. 1978's Halloween is one of the most classic slasher horror films out there. This film set in effect the next decade of horror and really changed the game for the genre. Too bad they made how many sequels? If you count the 2018 reboot trilogy, we have 10 sequels to go through, and that's not even counting the Rob Zombie films. So, let's do another quickfire. Halloween 2 wasn't terrible, all things considered, a generic slasher horror that doesn't nearly feel as fresh as the original, but I guess not egregious. Season of the Witch is strangely the only major film without Michael Myers, and you can tell because it sucks. You could easily switch out Halloween 4, 5, or 6 and they'd all be interchangeably terrible, with The Curse of Michael Myers easily being the worst. Halloween H2O celebrated 20 years of the franchise, and you can tell because it sucks, but it isn't as bad as 4 through 6. Even if Curse of Michael Myers was bad, Resurrection in 2002 was worse. You put Busta Rhymes as a main character, of course I hate this. It felt tacky compared to the original. Weirdly, it had the same director as Halloween 2, easily the closest to a good sequel pre-2018. He also did Smallville.
No, you don't get it. Michael Myers is Superman, I tell ya.
The 2018 Halloween is probably the best of the entire 10 sequels. It felt like a breath of fresh air for Michael Myers. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends are both pretty bad, but nothing compared to that mid-90s, early 2000s stretch. So yeah, franchise went downhill quick and it felt like they just threw shit at the wall that didn't really stick. Holy shit. Land Before Time was a 1988 animated flick from the brilliant mind of Don Bluth. Now for some reason, Don Bluth's projects sometimes warranted unneeded sequels. All Dogs Go to Heaven and American Tail, definitely not Titan AE. Yeah, bad year for the Titan AE convention.
Couldn't ever taste the damn movie!
But amongst all of them, Land Before Time didn't just get a sequel, it got 13! Of course, they were all low-budget DVD sequels, similar to the Alpha and Omega films. And yeah, sorry, I'm already dragging this video out, so I had to choose quickly of all 13 sequels, which was the best. And they definitely all suck, but I definitely say the 10th film, Great Long Neck Migration, was at least above average. As for the worst, any of them could work, but I'll go with movie number 11, Invasion of the Tiny Sauruses. The Wisdom of Friends was also a candidate, but I ultimately remember nothing about number 11 the most. Police Academy is often the poster child of unfunny spoof movies. Though this wasn't at the time of scary movie or disaster movie, this was a time where parody was the most respected form of comedy. The first film released in 1984 and was the closest thing to funny in the entire franchise. Police Academy 2 released in 1985 and it's actually comical how unfunny this franchise became. Though the sad part is this is the best sequel and it ain't even close. Police Academy 3 released in 1986 and it definitely did that. Release. Police Academy 4 in 1987, Police Academy 5 in 1988, Police Academy 6 in 1989, and the latest Police Academy, Mission in Moscow, in 1994. The only Police Academy not to have an immediate release the year after the last one. But geez, from 1984 to 1989, there was at least something to do with Police Academy. If I had to choose the worst of the sequels, like I said, they all suck, but I'd say Mission in Moscow is probably the worst in terms of comedy, and Police Academy 2 is the closest thing to below average these films got. But there's also franchises that feel like they got a lot of sequels, but I'd argue they have something that makes them unique. First is James Bond, a classic espionage story. The main difference here is that James Bond has changed actors in various occasions. It's not just one actor. For a while it was Sean Connery, for a few movies it was Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, the most recent with Daniel Craig. I do think it's unfair to judge every film as a sequel, as each iteration offers a new experience. Mission Impossible almost felt like this, as the original trilogy of films didn't exactly wow audiences, but with the fourth film came new changes and it felt unique, like a completely different experience. John Wick sometimes gets grouped as too many sequels, but I'd like to see how Ballerina and the eventual John Wick 5 play out before I judge that, because I still love these movies.
Bad news, guys. I've been informed that I don't have much longer to live. Apparently, this tummy ache has turned into... But thankfully, the doctor told me that as long as they never make another Spy Kids movie, I'll be alive and well.